Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this webinar. We're going to be talking about digital stewardship of donors in a post-COVID global philanthropy world. I'm really delighted to be offering this to you through Chapel in York. And we are especially excited to have with us our speakers for this evening or this morning, depending on where you're located. Douglas Tanton is our host. And then we have two special guests today. I'm very fortunate to have them both, Rod Patterson of Popsicle Media and Audrey He of Animals Asia. So we have a really great presentation in store for you today, depending on where you are. As we get started, I just have a few notes that I wanted to share. First, the webinar is being recorded, so you can take notes as we go through, but also rest assured that you will receive a link to the recording within a couple of days after we conclude, so that way you'll have access to all the great content that's shared in this webinar, and you can refer back to it as you need to. And I will also say that we will have time for Q&A at the end of the webinar, but if questions come up as we're going through the content, please do feel encouraged and empowered to pop a question into the chat. We'll be keeping an eye on that throughout the session, so we can answer those questions as they arise, as well as at the end. So just to share a little bit about Chapel in York, if you're not familiar with us, and a little bit about myself, Chapel in York, we refer to ourselves as the home of international philanthropy, and we really lean into that as our identity. And we do that through three different ways. One is that we work with charities for tax-effective giving, and we do that through either managing independent entities. So we have a charity management arm. So if an organization in the UK wishes to set up an entity in the US so that they can fundraise with US citizens who can then receive a tax-effective benefit through their giving, we can set up an entity for them and manage it. We also have a global family of foundations. So these are Chapel in York foundations set up in 7 different countries around the world. Charities can have a fund within the foundation, and donors can give through that and receive tax benefits for their giving, even if the entity itself is based somewhere else. The foundations provide a nice bridge for that. And we also have international fundraising services available to really help understand the markets and the audiences and the most effective strategies for areas outside the region where you happen to be based. So again, through tax-effective giving solutions such as charity management services and our family of foundations, through our international fundraising, we really do try to provide good breadth and reach to foster and grow international philanthropy all around the world. So for myself, if you haven't met me before, I'm Executive Director for the US Foundation of Chapel in York, and I'm also the leader of our family of foundations. And I'm especially excited that we can offer this webinar on digital stewardship, because what we've seen in international philanthropy is that the pandemic, while there were a lot of challenges and changes it brought on, there were some positives that came out. And it really, one of those is the catalyst effect it had on the embracing of digital tools in fundraising. It was different organizations were doing it in different places, but there was always a bit of hesitancy, I think, kind of feeling, especially in international fundraising, that you really had to have a large budget to be doing international fundraising, because you had to be traveling and seeing people in person, putting out events, and really having that face-to-face time with donors. But what we've seen through the pandemic is that donors respond just as effectively through digital connections, through those digital channels and tools. So it's exciting to see how different charities are embracing that, leaning into it, and adopting new ways of connecting with donors and growing their donor base and retaining more donors through that digital opportunity. So with that, that's enough about Chapel in York and enough about me. I'd like to turn it over to our host for this evening, this morning, Douglas Tanton. Douglas is just a fantastic person, brilliant, a wealth of experience. He's a partner in One Step Productions and also a strategic partner for Chapel in York. He's been working in global development, philanthropy, a number of very significant organizations, everything from global environment and development, music, arts and culture, showing not just being able to retain results, but also growing them as well. So I think you will find a lot of value on what he brings to this conversation for our webinar today on digital stewardship, as well as our special guests, Audrey and Rod. But with that, Douglas, I will turn over to you to start us off.
Thank you, Heather, and thank everyone for joining us. I'm so pleased to be here this morning, and it's a very interesting topic. So many things have been happening in digital stewardship. So let's just take a moment and break it down a little bit for today's session. What's it about? So let's unpack it a little bit. It's about digital stewardship, but what does that mean for your nonprofit to have a digital stewardship program? We all talked for years about stewardship programs. Now we're talking about digital stewardship programs. And what are the tools, tactics, and the basket of goods in that digital stewardship program? And what are the things that people are doing to really build their and develop their digital stewardship program? It's about a post-COVID world. There's been this incredible impact of COVID has had on all of us. From personal impacts to impacts in our work. How has our interaction with our donors and prospective donors been impacted by COVID and face-to-face gatherings? What are some of the COVID coping measures that we're all employing, and how do we keep doing these, and why are we doing them? And I guess the final piece, as Heather said, it's about a global philanthropic world. How has our ability to steward donors digitally changed as we now work across borders, teams working in a variety of settings and across cultural settings? So let's try and break those three pieces down and see where we're going with that this morning. Digital stewardship, understanding what it means. The first thing that I'd really like to highlight as we get into our conversation today is, for all of us, it doesn't matter where your donors are acquired. It doesn't matter if it's a face-to-face relationship, building a foundational partner for your global nonprofit concern. It doesn't matter if it's a street or door face-to-face acquisition, or a direct mail acquisition, or if it's a digital acquisition or Facebook acquisition, or any number of ways that people are joining and becoming donors of your organization. Individuals are getting involved. It doesn't matter where they're acquired. We don't need to address that when we're talking about digital stewardship. Digital stewardship welcomes all donors from all channels. And the key is that ongoing digital connection, digital communication channels following acquisition to build and reinforce donor engagement. What are some of the key tools and tactics that nonprofits are employing for their digital stewardship program? Well, one of the biggest or most important areas of change over the past 5 years is the area of automation, starting with email automation. And it's a hotly contested and challenged area. And I'm still not convinced that the final say has been had for automation or non-automation. However, what we're seeing is highly personalized, automated campaigns in the arena of welcome, in the arena of stewardship, in the arena even of acquisition transfer happening for organizations. And we're going to talk a little bit about that with one of the cases later. We're also noticing push contents. People are putting together stories and sending them out. So you're seeing people where they have YouTube channels and Vimeo channels, and all of these things are happening. And 5 years ago, if I would have asked some of our nonprofit partners if they had a Vimeo or a YouTube channel, they'd say, no, that's my son or daughter has that because they do skateboarding videos, but not so much anymore. People are actually building their story, their narrative content, and pushing them out through these channels. In addition, with those broad push contents, you're seeing one-to-one or group audio, video, push messaging chats, which you're seeing people use things like WhatsApp or Slack or different platforms to chat, communicate with groups of donors. And that happens both audio and video. You're seeing pre-recorded digital conferences, sometimes with Q&A. And we've seen some of those even as fundraisers and training. We've seen that organizations will do a broad global pre-recorded audio-visual conference, and then they'll split up into Q&As in local languages around the world. So some very exciting things happening. And one of perhaps the most exciting areas of change and growth during and since COVID is these incredibly lively audio and video live in the field digital conferences that are often done with either global or nationalized Q&As. And I know that Audrey and Rod have both been deeply involved in many of those tools and tactics, and we'll turn to them to get some of their perspectives as we move through things. So what does it mean in a post-COVID world? What are some of the things that we've activated? Well, I like to suggest that we're activating new uses for our digital tools and channels. And that's happened because of COVID. So in the United States, I think there's something like 60% of organizations who have commenced the process of virtual organization thanks and welcome. What we're also noticing is that the other 40% who were surveyed said, yes, we're moving to a virtual thanks and welcome process. So complete use of the virtual or audio video thanks and welcome package as part of digital stewardship is really taking place around us day to day. We're seeing, because of COVID, the use of virtual, middle and major giving cultivation, stewardship events, building cases for support, conversation replacing printed reports and face-to-face meetings. I can pass this on to Audrey. We were just speaking earlier today. We had an incredible opportunity with a digital prospect who was a Hong Kong-based Animals Asia team interest. She's in Europe at the moment, and she wants to help take Hong Kong donors to Vietnam to do meetings or view the new bear sanctuaries of Animals Asia. So that's happening because at the moment, she's not able to go back to Hong Kong, and it's happening because she's connecting with our organization or Animals Asia virtually and digitally, which is really exciting. So it just shows that it's not just low-level donors. People are getting involved digitally, both from a stewardship of current donors to building those prospects. Posting to branded digital channels of the digital field video is kind of the newest way. I mentioned on the previous page that people are doing the digital field videos, and they had been done previously. Oh, you have to shut up your iPods. Yeah, well, what's wrong? Just shut me off. Sorry. I lost my audio. Am I back? Okay, let's move on. Digital stewardship in a global philanthropy world. More and more donors and donor stewardship events are happening across national boundaries, which is a really big development. Global virtual events are regularly attended by donors from multiple national offices, and then they're split up, which I find really incredible. We're having these broad global events to talk about campaigns and programs and field visits. And then at the end of the event, groups of donors are then nurtured through a Q&A process with individual national offices. And that's a very exciting development that's happening more and more because we're in this global philanthropic world. And finally, connecting like-minded donors. We're all doing it now. Women's groups, men's groups, youth groups, professional groups. We've just done one with architects for the United Nations High Commission for Refugees. People getting involved around the world and getting involved because of their like-minded affiliation, be it geographic, be it demographic, be it cause-related. So you're seeing gender groups and children's groups and youth groups, and they're happening across border around the world. It's just incredible. Earlier this week, I had the opportunity to speak with Ganesh Epson of the World Food Program about their digital stewardship work. We felt that there was an interest because they've been doing their program for 3 years. And although Ganesh can't be with us this evening, they have this incredible case of an ongoing digital implementation. The World Food Program is the world's largest humanitarian organization. It saves lives in emergency, uses food assistance to build a pathway for peace, stability, and prosperity. And part of their strategy over the past 3 or 4 years is the World Food Program started investing heavily in individual giving and introduced the first elements of their digital stewardship program for donors about 3 or 4 years ago. How has it impacted? About half of the increases in revenues raised from individual giving is coming from current donors. So in 2019, they raised $3.1 million basically. In 2020, they raised 12.1 million, and in 2021, 24.1. What that means is that in 2019, they were receiving about $1.6 million from current donors. Now they're receiving about 11 or 12 million from current donors. So incredible growth based on this digital stewardship program they've been building. So some exciting things the World Food Program is doing in digital donor stewardship. They have a multi-channel approach. They have not only embraced one channel or YouTube, or what they work across every channel. And the one thing Ganesh really highlighted is that they are open to continually try new channels. And that may mean very segmented, nationally specific or regionally specific channels of contact, or broad global channels. They have built a lot more tech support. They have an incredibly sophisticated back end for their supporter journeys. This was probably the biggest eye opener that Ganesh and the team at the World Food Program shared with us earlier, just how much their investment was in tech support to make it all happen. Because of that investment in tech support and the sophisticated back end, they have a lot more data insight support, fully data-driven fundraising decisions, making it at all levels. Continuous testing and optimization. We talk about this all the time as fundraisers, but it's really incredible what World Food Program said, because Ganesh said this week, it's the most exciting part of her work. She's always testing something, always trying to optimize results. And that's very encouraging for all of us, because I think while we feel that digital is the path to move forward, some of us sometimes feel it's quite daunting to deal with the digital technology. I know I do at times. What are some of the big exciting things that Ganesh talked about from the World Food Program that is really building engagement with supporters via their digital platforms? And one is they look at Facebook not as an acquisition channel, but they're building a really exciting retention program on Facebook. And they feel that that's a big part of where they're moving in the future. They've built a standalone global supporter care agency that really drives innovation, does testing. So a small group of individuals who work for supporter care through this agency, and all they do are drive tests and then drive management to consider innovations. Many of us suggest innovation funds or innovation tests, but by fully implementing innovation as day-to-day jobs, it really has forced World Food Program to look at those results and take them more seriously. That includes the best-in-class donor experience, a high level of supporter service. Personalized asks at the individual giving level has been a really important piece for World Food Program, is breaking down their asks at the individual giving level. And I think Ganesh really shared with us how important it was, whether they were high net worth individuals or low level, regular monthly givers, that the personalized giving and personalized ask really made a difference. Areas for growth in the World Food Program supporter engagement program. We kind of challenged Ganesh and we said, what are some of the areas that you would like to grow? And they'd like to see some, easier, frictionless payment options. They say that they're still struggling with that in the digital world, is to get the payment options right. They're looking at additional non-financial engagement opportunities. Where are there ways that we can engage with people around the world and keep them involved? As I described earlier, the World Food Program talked about Facebook fundraisers as a powerful retention tool, not just as a fundraising tool. And as Ganesh suggested to us earlier, additional languages, with each language requiring an additional operation stream, is a very big deal for World Food Program to continue to build their breadth and their connection with people around the world. Connecting on languages is vital to their long-term success. More sophisticated journeys, give the support of the control and choice on how, when, and through what channels they give, and how to make it easy to give. So I think the point of those 4, 5, 6 points is they have success. They're building their digital stewardship program, but they continue to look at areas for growth, areas where they're finding challenges, and reviewing, assessing. Let's invite one of our experienced guests for his own perspective. I'm going to invite Rod Patterson. He has 20 years of fundraising experience across the Asia Pacific markets, and he's implemented traditional and digital supporter journeys, engagements, acquisition in-house, agency, face-to-face, tele-fundraising, online. You've done quite a bit, Rod. It makes me tired to go through it all. I hope you don't have to do it all every day. Over to you, Rod.
Yeah, thanks, Douglas. Thanks for the introduction as well. I've been, as Douglas mentioned, I've been working for quite a long time, particularly specializing in regular giving, or sustainer giving, as people in the States refer to it. So that's really where I kind of come from when I talk about digital stewardship. And Douglas asked me to talk a little bit about what I'm seeing in Asia, because over the last 10 years, I've mostly been working with Asia-based organizations. And I would say that many of the things which have been mentioned so far, I'm starting to see in Asia, although perhaps not quite at the level of sophistication as it sounds like the World Food Program is doing. I mean, what they're doing is truly inspiring, and to see that growth from the individual giving is also amazing. Although I must say, I've been working closely with Animals Asia for the last couple of years, and we've also seen some pretty massive growth coming in pretty much from donors acquired digitally as well. So I can vouch for the for digital acquisition as a channel which definitely we should be exploring more. But I guess what I'm seeing in Asia is as was mentioned in the World Food Program slides, is increased focus on technology, so more sophisticated CRM systems, where you can set up all sorts of automated digital journeys. And in addition to that, some of the platforms offer some kind of AI, artificial intelligence, which can also help you in it sounds funny actually. It helps you personalize some of these messages more if you've got an AI component, especially when you're communicating with, say, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of donors or prospects. I'm also seeing charities in Asia trying to use social messaging apps more. It's a bit more fragmented in Asia because you have, say, in countries, say, like Thailand, you have the Line messaging app, which dominates. In South Korea, you've got Kakao Talk. In Hong Kong, I think it sort of switches between WhatsApp and some of the Chinese messaging apps. So, that's a bit fragmented across the sort of Asia Pacific region. Of course, trying to tell a story, trying to use more video. I think I saw on one of the slides that short video is important. I also would say short videos with captions because we're seeing more and more people coming online from mobile devices. At least 80% of online interactions coming from mobile now. So and often these people are sitting on the bus or on the metro, so they don't have their sound on. So that's an important thing to remember when doing videos. There's charities experimenting with some of the newer apps like TikTok. Yes, there's a whole range of different things going on in Asia. Many of which you mentioned, Douglas.
Thanks. It is interesting, Rod. Do you think it's a perspective of the Asia Pacific market is catching up in some areas of digital stewardship on the nonprofit sector, or do you see that's uneven and some organizations are far ahead of others, as we heard from the WHO program?
Yeah, I think it's quite uneven. I think the pandemic encouraged nonprofits to look for digital acquisition tools, and so then that's kind of inspired this sort of push towards digital stewardship. I think even before the pandemic, face-to-face fundraising and telemarketing was becoming more expensive. So that kind of transition or the sort of testing of other channels have already started, but the pandemic really kind of, moved that along a lot faster. And there's still a way to go, because I think most nonprofits in Asia that do face-to-face are finding that they're not able to achieve the same kind of volume through digital channels yet. It depends a little bit on the country. I think some countries are a bit more advanced, like South Korea, for example, seems to be more advanced in digital acquisition than, say, some of the other Asian countries. So it's a bit mixed between countries and also between the types of nonprofits involved.
Thanks, Rod. Would you be willing to hang around with us for the next 30 minutes? And if there's any questions on the Asia Pacific markets, maybe you could field those as we get towards the end of our session.
Yeah, sure, of course.
I'd really like to move and to turn it over to Audrey He. And Audrey He is with Animals Asia, and she's the supporter experience director for Animals Asia in Hong Kong. It's an organization devoted to ending bare bell farming and improving welfare of animals across Asia. Audrey is a fundraising specialist. She's worked in a number of different roles and just moving into this new role. And I think I was quite excited to hear from Audrey, because Animals Asia is just starting to make that step, as Rod mentioned, where they have digital acquisition kind of humming along. And now the question is, how do we extend that digital skill set across all of our stewardship activities around the world? And it has a very diverse team working around the world. So I wanted to ask a few questions of Audrey herself personally and in this role. And Audrey, welcome. And without further ado, let's ask a few questions. So the organization was founded in 1998, and you've been campaigning since 1994, winning bear sanctuaries in China and Vietnam. And your founder is quite a story, Jill Robinson, widely recognized as the leading authority on the very cruel bear bile industry, and you've moved into this role just in the last 3 months. So so many programmatic initiatives, so many things happening. So I guess the first question for you is, what is the challenges of this role, and why did you think it was something interesting for you? No further ado, I'll turn it over to Audrey.
Thank you, Douglas. Firstly, I just wanted to say that I really embrace this opportunity to speak with you at this webinar. I really found the work that Ganesh at the World Food Programme is doing fascinating, because that's where we're trying to head to. I think we're at the very start of the finish line, but every journey starts with us just making a step in the right direction. As Douglas just said, I've moved into the supporter experience team to lead the global team just recently. Previous to that, I worked in the individual giving program as well as the philanthropy program at Animals Asia. And usually you would think, why would a fundraiser decide to go to the more operations experience side? And the answer is that it's one of the most important parts of our organization right now. Rod, has worked on with some really fantastic projects, leading the direct marketing acquisition for Animals Asia. And as he just said, it has gone really well. And as Douglas said, it's been not just humming along, I think it's been kind of racing along. So the digital acquisition has been going so well, mostly through Facebook advertising, and the experience and the donor care has not caught up to the volume and the potential that the acquisition has brought into us. As Heather said at the beginning, the pandemic has I think sped along what we were all moving towards. We all work for not-for-profits, and at the end of the day, we stay fairly lean. The way Douglas described our global supported care team, it makes it sound massive, and we're not. We have a single person in each market. We have a single person in Italy, a single person in Germany, a person in Australia, one in the UK, one in Scotland, and one in Hong Kong. And that is our global supported care and gift processing team. And Animals Asia has quite a unique structure that before the pandemic, we had already decided we needed to be lean as a fundraising team. We have fundraising programs all across the world, but we needed to ensure that the fundraising team itself stayed as lean as possible. So we actually have a very global structure. There aren't country teams. Everyone reports to a global team, which is why this is the global supporter experience team that I've been asked to lead. And with the many opportunities of a global program like that, which is that we can be flexible, we can pivot, what markets are doing well. There's always going to be something happening at a macro level somewhere in the world, but we have a very robust organization and fundraising program because we can kind of go to where the opportunities are. The challenges are what you can imagine. How do you keep a support experience team really cohesive? And currently, I would call us a supported care and gift processing team, but the remit is to evolve into an experience team. We've done such fantastic work when it comes to our fundraising, but how do we really start to build donor loyalty and actually build that donor experience and think about them from beginning to end? If you can just go back to the other slide, Douglas. So the gaps that we have definitely already, which I can identify, which we've identified and which I've then seen and what the World Food Programme is doing really well. The digital community management that they're doing is really quite inspiring. Rod mentioned it is a bit up and down when it comes to how digital communications are in Asia. But what I have noticed in the individual giving and philanthropy roles, because I've been living in Hong Kong for the last 3.5 years, is that supporters are definitely ready to embrace digital channels when they communicate with us. You could send an email to a donor and not respond, and all you get back is WhatsApp me, please. And they don't mean a call, they mean WhatsApp. Or we have a very, very small handful of donors in China who you will not get them on any other channel except for WeChat. They will not respond to your emails, they won't pick up a call, but if you WeChat them, they'll be responding. So that's a way to engage with them anyway. And in terms of other priorities that we know, which is what I've noticed that the World Food Programme has started to look into, the multi-language capability and really mobilizing the community to kind of come together. as well as the automation of, if a donor wants something, they should be able to find it online first and not have to go, send an email for every single thing. So there's a lot of work ahead of us, but I'm really pleased to see that there are others doing it so well in the space already. So that was a bit of a start of that first question. Just making sure that in this changing world, even if it's hard to connect in person, which we've all found over the last few years, we can still connect our cause to the donor, and we can still bring that level of care and passion to our donors. And it happens very well on a digital platform. We're very lucky to be an organization with a very clear mission, and our work is really engaging, and it looks beautiful digitally. You can't really go past beautiful bears, coming to Sanctuary after a lifetime of torture, like the photo that you just see there. So we're going to continue to pivot, and we're just going to continue to. We're just at the start. So I think that was everything I wanted to say for that question, Douglas. Am I frozen or are you frozen?
No, I'm ready to go. I've moved on to what are the exciting things that you're doing in digital donor stewardship, or what are the areas that you really want to move into?
Okay, so as we said before, the fundraising and communications program has done really well in moving to a very digital first approach. Almost 100% of our donor acquisition, up till now anyway, for the last 2 years, has come from digital advertising. And it means that we set our donors initially on a digital journey during the first few months, but it's not seamless because we haven't quite transitioned the supporter care team to be digitally led. And we just don't know very much about our donors. I think one of the things we need to be is data-led and actually understanding, what it is that supporters want, how they want to hear it, when they want to hear it, how often they want to hear it. And we want to definitely create a supporter journey that counters the narrative that digital is a lower level experience. We think that you can make digital very personal, especially with, like I said, the great content. And I've worked with many program teams, and I have to say the program teams for Animals Asia are fantastic. They see themselves as part of the fundraising team. If do we want content that will engage a certain donor group, they'll get it for us. If the Wi-Fi allows it, which it doesn't, it's not very well in our Vietnam sanctuary. But we've even had sessions where one of our bear care managers will be kind of showing a bear to a particular donor that has a there are opportunities to bring the work that we do to our donors. Our high value partnerships team, so the philanthropy and foundations and corporate partnership team, trialed a lot of digital experiences for our high value donors during the 2020 and 2021. Our webinars, ones like this, kept our supporters informed and updated by being able to speak directly to our program team. We had fireside chats that gave donors the opportunity to really engage with the bear carers, the vets, and actually asking them questions. Like I just said, there was even some opportunity for a donor who has given a substantial donation to the care of a particular part of the sanctuary to actually see it and the work being done on the day, watch a health check, look at a certain bear that they have an affinity with, actually playing with, a mobile phone that's been held by the sanctuary team. And our social media channels were more viewed than ever before during this period because the content team have just done a fantastic job. But the question is, how do we bring all this amazing content that, we're putting out on social media? Our high value donors are getting it. But how do we string it together to form a more seamless automated donor journey for every single supporter, regardless of how long they've supported us, what they support from your $5 up to, anything. We want everyone to have the same experience. But as we've already seen in our learnings for the last 2 years, I think it's really possible. And so, I think there are some exciting things ahead for us.
Should we move on, Audrey?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think are the areas for even greater digital growth when you think about where you're moving to as an organization?
I mentioned previously, we just have a lot of work to do to understand our donors' digital habits and how they consume content. I think at the moment we do a lot of what I call push content. here's who we are, here's what we're doing, here's what we think you're going to find interesting, and here it is. On social media, as with everything else, there's an opportunity for some supporters to talk back, but we want an opportunity for all supporters, regardless of how they consume media. Like I said, we're only just starting to get on our legs when it comes to WeChat, to connect with our very, very hugely the huge potential that's there in China. We know that Facebook isn't used globally as much as it is, for example, in the West. There are other social media platforms. What are other ways we can share our content? And we need to find out and not just work on assumptions. We face the challenge of how to execute a donor journey across multiple countries. Our fundraising programs are in Australia, United Kingdom, Germany, Italy, all across Europe, in Luxembourg, Austria, Switzerland. Hong Kong is where most of our Asian donors are, but like I said, we're building a program in China. And we do know we have some really passionate supporters in Japan, as well as Vietnam, Malaysia, Singapore, and Taiwan. And of course, we have the USA, which we have a team there as well. So we can't just, it's not a one size fits all. I don't even know what that looks like yet, because, even the way we communicate would be different. You can't just put people in the same kind of content and subject journey. I think everyone's interested in slightly different things. We don't just advocate to stop the bear bale trade, but we also do a lot of work with cat and dog welfare and captive animal, with elephants. Is there a way to actually understand what it is that a particular donor wants to hear more about, and finding a way to ensure that their journey is tailored to them? So our challenge now is, how do we continue to work even more closely with the direct marketing and high value partnership teams to bring all of our donors from the beginning to end on a seamless journey? And then I think the main thing right now is that we need to think about how a support experience team contributes to the overall retention. How do we actually have a measurable impact on the income and other KPIs of a fundraising program? So these are the kind of conversations we've already started. But we are, like I said, right at the beginning of it.
Thanks, Audrey. I had a couple specific questions for you, Audrey, before we open it up. And it's really interesting times when you review the World Food Program, their digital program, and you think, wow, that's 3 or 4 years. And I recognize that the volume or the size of your team. When you're building your planning and looking at it, how are you able to accept best practices and implement pilots and tests? Do you look at national markets, or are you thinking of implementing some of your tests globally? How do you anticipate rolling some of these things out? Because there's a number of areas that you're moving forward.
Yes, it's important that we break things into bite-sized pieces as we move forward. One of the challenges of working in a global market is that it's not all the same. You sometimes do have to just prioritize certain markets. I have to say that what we have noticed with our digital advertising and digital acquisition is that the markets that have done really well in terms of return on investment, and therefore where the volume is now coming from, is the US, with the UK and Germany. And when it comes to doing tests, you have to go where there's the volume, and so that would be where we would start to really look at it. Although I have to say that while that is definitely how we will look at testing, I think there are just some really exciting learnings to be had when we try to learn about the habits and finding better practices when it comes to the Asian market. I could be biased because I'm actually based in the Hong Kong office, although I spent the first 10 of my 13 years in fundraising in the Australian direct marketing industry. So I just think there's a lot of interesting stuff that small tests in China and Hong Kong could do. At the end of the day, we can do a lot of testing and really looking at the volumes, but I think it will come from the team as well. I think there probably needs to be a bit of a, like I said, a reset for the team, who are all, this like one person working from home, all across the world taking care of supporters, and they're passionate and they care so much about our donors. And I think ensuring that they continue to feel connected with our work so that they can ensure that the supporters feel connected with our work. Even if they're not we're trying to connect with them on film, it comes less and less. How do we then ensure that they feel a part of the journey, that we're going to be bringing that level of care and passion through all the channels? Because I think that a donor's journey and the length and quality of a donor's journey starts with the experience they receive upon a first interaction with a person. We can say automated journey, but at some point there will be a connection with someone in the organization. It will probably be one of the supporter experience teams. So how can we ensure that they have all the tools that they need?
Oh, thanks, Audrey. It's really helpful. And I'd like to open up the floor to other questions, but before I turn it back to Heather, I was just thinking, Heather Hill, I could see your interest in some areas. Maybe you had a couple of questions before we invite everyone else to open up. Did you have some questions for Audrey and Rod?
Sure. So I had a couple of questions. One maybe is more of an observation than a question, but so I know for just our Chapel in York Family Foundations, one thing that we've really been focusing on is trying to help fund holders understand my cat fundraising in the specific markets where the foundations are based. So for example, our Hong Kong foundation, the fund holders there are based elsewhere. So they're either in the US or the UK or other places around the world. And I think as kind of the environment shifted, and just even as we've seen with World Food Program versus Animals Asia versus other entities as well, everyone's at different stages of where they are in their digital programming, and kind of seeing even just based beyond the maturity of the program, just kind of how does that vary from region to region? Because what we found is the expectations of donors in Hong Kong are different than the expectations of donors in the UK, different than the expectations in the Netherlands or Switzerland. So it's been very interesting, I think, to see certain tools there's an expectation in certain places, and other times it's okay to be a little bit more rough or in the learning phase, I think, as far as what the donor is expecting and the level of digital experience that they're looking for from the charities. So I'm kind of curious, long-winded way of asking my question. I'm kind of curious to see what you've been seeing in some of the nuances of supporters within your regions and differing response rates, or if that's something that you'll be looking at as you measure kind of effectiveness and start to tweak the program a bit. Whether Audrey, if you want to answer that, or if Rod, if you've seen anything as well, I'd be interested to hear your perspectives on that.
I'd be happy to start and talk about it from an Animals Asia perspective, and then hear from Rod about what he sees across the different markets in Asia. Long story short, we have probably because fundraising is a much more established sector in the UK. We have, and this could be our experience only, and like I said, it's the first time I've been able to really truly see the global. It's like you can see everything here at Animals Asia, whereas previously at all the other organizations, I would be the Australian office, for example, But the UK donors have a certain expectation. They know what they want. They know what they're entitled to have. And so they have expectations of certain care. It could be because our program there is the most established. But I do know that, they are still expecting to be able to pick up a phone and speak to someone. They are, but they are then also starting to be on all the other channels as well. Being the one who worked having worked in Hong Kong, I did notice that it's much more straightforward with a lot of our Asian donors. They're not going to ask you for things. In fact, that gives you a lot. In fact, it's not necessarily a good thing when they're not asking you for things, because you don't know what it is that they actually want. And it's up to you to be much more proactive with them. I'm generalizing a little bit, but that's the two different ends of the spectrum. And then all our other markets kind of sit somewhere between. Having worked in Australia for a really long time, as much as a lot of people are embracing digital channels, at the end of the day, there are certain things that you do need to know that even if it's not a phone, at least you're connecting with someone from the organization. There's a lot more still of a mailing around, and this is just the experience that I've had in my personal experience. But that's why it's not going to be a one size fits all as we kind of moved when we talk about automated digital journey. Sounds fantastic. But it's just going to be a lot harder than we necessarily think. And I'd love to hear what Rod and Douglas think, because they've both also worked with, they both have been consultants working quite closely with Animals Asia, as well as having other experiences.
Rod, I'm very curious. You've had the unique perspective of being based in Scandinavia, understanding donors' expectations. You've been based in Istanbul. You've worked extensively in India and Asia Pacific, and now your digital program is quite heavy in the US market. So you've kind of seen it all. Your comments on that, I'm really curious.
Yeah, I mean, I have to answer that from a kind of mass or direct marketing perspective, because I don't have that sort of close sort of one-to-one interaction with donors that Audrey has had. But certainly there are quite different response rates across these different markets, not just in digital, of course, but also in things like phone response. So, for example, with telephone, we find much more difficult in the US to reach donors. For example, they're just not answering the phone compared to, say, donors in the UK or Australia. I know I'm kind of moving off the digital track, and when I mentioned phone. And in terms of digital acquisition, as Audrey said, with Animals Asia, we've been able to kind of really test that, because with Animals Asia take such a kind of global approach to its fundraising, and and we've seen that it's much more, for Animals Asia at least, it's been much more cost effective to recruit digital donors in the UK and the US and Germany than other markets. And so that's where the volume is. But having said that, I have seen examples of organisations in Asia that have done really well with digital acquisition and stewardship. I mean, I've worked closely with Greenpeace East Asia, in different periods of my life, and they're one of the fastest growing Greenpeace offices globally, and a lot of that's becoming more and more because of their digital work in places like Taiwan or South Korea. And also DRTV in South Korea as well. So yeah, a sort of long-winded way of saying yes, the responses vary quite a bit. But it's also a bit hard to know whether it's also because of the messaging that you're using. Like animal welfare, for example, in the UK just seems to be a subject which just gets UK donors, really motivated, whereas maybe in other parts of the world it's less motivating. So I think the actual proposition that you've got is also really important, of course.
Thanks, Rod. Back to you, Heather. If you want to open up the floor or have any other questions.
I had one other question I thought I would ask as well. Audrey, you'd mentioned that, one of the next challenges that we're taking on is really getting a better understanding of what your donors want as far as how they want to be engaged and connected. So I just wondered whether you or Rod or Douglas have any tips for our audience about good ways to kind of gather that information, what's effective in kind of getting that information from your donors as far as finding that out. I know surveys are one option, but are there certain ways that you can deliver those surveys that get better response? How do you really get them to share their true preferences versus just ticking a box and not really thinking about it, and then you do what they said and they still don't connect. So I think there's some of those challenges with knowing how to ask the right questions and asking them through the right channels to actually get actionable data from your donors.
I'm curious, Audrey, Rod?
I mean, I'll start with my perspective, which is that yes, of course, there are ways you can just email a survey out, but then you get, oh, I love the cat just peeking behind you. That's fantastic. And with email surveys or mail surveys, so you get a donor by they select themselves who wants to talk to you. And when I was working in the philanthropy team, what we ensured that whenever we had questions, it wasn't an email, it was weaved into the calls that we had with our donors, so that it was quite it can't be like 10 questions, but you'd have the three things that you really needed to know, and ensure that for the next 3 months, every philanthropy donor kind of manager kind of weaved it into their conversations. Even though it wasn't a huge volume, it gave you their thoughts and definitely the true kind of feelings of the donors we're speaking to, because we're doing it quite organically. It doesn't feel like they're being surveyed. So my first thought was that I needed to speak to the team about how to weave 1 or 2 questions in at the end, whenever they have a call or an email with a donor. Like I said, I've noticed that there is a lot less emphasis on calling. And so, with emails, it's easy to ignore a question. So I really, really do have to think about that. But I feel like what I've seen done well, and I can't remember which organization it was, but I had, just a regular giving upgrade for one of my support, and they just said, "Oh, is it okay?" Sometimes they call you and you upgrade and you either do or you don't, but they always had questions at the end to ask about how I felt about the communications, what I wanted to hear more about. And that felt quite good and organic, because even if I said yes to the upgrade or no, I didn't, regardless, I felt like they cared about me as a donor, what I wanted to hear about.
That's great. Yeah, and I think that's an important point, and having kind of these open-ended channels for response, whether that's phone or email. But yeah, I think with the survey, you put the options there for them to choose from. And well, if I have to pick one of these, I guess this one,
Yeah.
even if it's not necessarily what their preference is. Like, again, WeChat is huge in China, but would every organization think to put that as an option on their communications preferences? And if you're not asking, if it's not an option for them to pick, how would you know that? So I think, again, the real-time conversations with donors to find that out. And again, weaving it in seamlessly with another conversation. So it's not them feeling that they're being surveyed, but actually having it be a lot more organic. I think that's a really great suggestion.
Rod, you had something to add to that?
Yeah, I think for me, the most important thing is to observe what your donors do rather than what they say they'll do or say that they want. I've always been a big believer in that. And when it comes to digital stewardship, you've just got so many opportunities to measure that. Did they open the email? Did they click on any of the links? Did they take any kind of action? And so by monitoring that over time, you can really get an idea of whether your donors are actually engaged with your messages, or are there certain groups of donors that are more engaged than others. So that's always the place I go to first. But again, it comes from my direct marketing background rather than a philanthropic approach, I guess, or a supporter care approach. And I think the other thing I would say is in some ways we expect digital communication to be really immediate, because that's how we sort of expect in our day-to-day life. We SMS someone, we expect them to reply straight away. We send them an email, we expect them to come back in an hour or so. But when it comes to digital stewardship, sometimes it takes quite a few messages to actually get the response that you want. And some organisations are seeing that there's quite a long tail. So you might have a cohort of donors who go into your supported journey, and when you look at them 12 months later, you find that, yeah, sure, some of them did respond in the way you wanted quite early on, but there's still like significant groups of donors responding 12 months later. So I think that's the other thing to kind of keep a perspective on. But sometimes it's actually a long-term sort of engagement or conversion process with digital stewardship.
Thanks, Rod.
Great.
Heather, did you see any questions from the audience that's still with us?
No questions in the chat. I think we could actually wrap up, but I would just thank you, Douglas. Thank you, Audrey. Thank you, Rod. Great examples and information and experiences that you shared with us for this webinar. I think it was very helpful. A lot of actionable insights that people can use and start to tinker with in their own programs. I think especially as we look at more digital acquisition, I had a boss years ago who used to always say, as they're acquired, so they renew. So thinking about if you're acquiring through digital acquisition, that's how you're going to retain them as well as through digital efforts. That's how the donors came to you. That's how they want to stay connected to you. So I think really being able to put together these high quality digital programs for stewardship is going to be really critical moving forward as this is kind of our new reality that we're using for fundraising. So really appreciate the thoughts and ideas that you shared. Just one other note, we will be sending out this webinar recording after we conclude. So you have all this great information that you can go back and refer to as you work on your own stewardship plans. I just really want to thank everyone for joining us for this session. Hope to be able to offer more like this going forward. But again, thank you, Douglas, Audrey, and Rod. And if any of you have any closing remarks you'd like to add, feel free. Otherwise, we'll wrap up.
Thank
No,
you
thank
so
you for
much,
having me.
Heather and Rod and Audrey.
Thank you.
you.
Have a good evening or afternoon.
Bye.